Hey there. So you asked for it? Today we're going to be covering release Ratatoskr in all his glory. From the king of the dash to down in the trash, Rat has sure had an interesting history over the years, including a pretty significant kit rework. So if this is your first time watching one of my god history episodes, this is essentially a look back at a god's release date, what it took to bring them back into balance, be that nerfs or buffs, and any kit reworks and stuff they've undergone over the years and the time they've been out. Alright, so without further ado, let's get right into it with release Rat. So one of the most iconic parts of Ratatoskr's kit before his rework was definitely the acorn upgrades. As you may know, currently Rat just has an acorn that upgrades down one path similar to Boots with a nice heal passive attached to it. Pre-rework Rat, however, had access to 4 different upgrade paths for the acorn: Opal, Topaz, Sapphire, and Emerald. The acorn branched into blue and yellow acorns at tier 2, of which blue provided a slow-on flurry of acorns and yellow provided bonus damage. Blue acorn then upgraded into either Sapphire or Emerald, both of which had 50 physical power and 15 pen. Sapphire turned Acorn Blast into a sticky bomb, so it did its initial damage and then after 2 seconds exploded for more damage. This was pretty damn good, but was often overlooked in favour of other more overpowered acorns. The Emerald Acorn, which provided a pretty huge heal for Rat based on enemies hit by Acorn Blast. This was probably his second most popular acorn, maybe joint with Sapphire, and it was mostly just used if you ever wanted to play solo lane Ratatoskr, since the sustain it gave was pretty much necessary for him to keep up with the popular warriors of the time. And on the other side, from the yellow acorn, you could get Topaz and Opal, both of which came with the same 50 power and also 25% CDR instead of the 15 pen. Topaz was the least popular acorn by far, even though I loved it personally. Essentially, with Topaz, any enemy you hit twice within 10 seconds with his dash will be stunned for 2 seconds. Yeah, this one was universally accepted as the worst acorn, but that didn't stop me from playing Rat support with the 2-second stun at 3 minutes into the game. And last but definitely not least, the Opal acorn was by far the most used and most overpowered acorn. It allowed Dart to shoot lightning out from the sides, basically doubling the effective area of the ability, but the real kicker was that the lightning bolts on the side of the dash applied item effects, so you could proc Golden Bow, Frostbound Hammer, Executioner, Kin Size, and it could crit and lifesteal. It was nuts. So yeah, the old acorns were definitely more powerful than the new one, and in my opinion they were more fun, but I guess trying to balance 4 different items just for one god was too much, so they changed it. It's also worth noting that none of these acorns had movement speed like the current one does, and Ratatoskr could still buy boots pre-rework. They weren't a replacement for his boots, they were just an extra item. So moving on to Rats 1. Rats 1 at release was another big part of why he was so broken. So current Rat can dash, stop at the first god hit, and it goes on cooldown, right? You can reduce it with your other abilities, stuff like that. Well, release Rat would pass through gods and reset the cooldown of the dash if he hits a god with it. Yeah, this guy could dash up to 6 times with one use of the ability. 6 times because if he hits a god he already hit within the last 10 seconds, it wouldn't reset the cooldown, but in teamfights it was realistic to get at least 3 dashes off, probably more. Especially with the Opal acorn that applied the lightning bolts to the sides, making the AOE of the dash much bigger and allowing you to hit multiple people. So yeah, hitting an enemy team multiple times with a dash that can crit, slow them with Frostbound Hammer, and proc AOE damage with Golden Bow was pretty good. So Rat's second ability was completely different at release than what it is now. Essentially, Rat sent out 12 acorns around him in a circle. They did damage on the way out, and after a short time flew back to Rat's location, doing damage again on the way back. So this ability was mostly used in combination with Dart. Since the dash went through enemies instead of stopping back then, you could throw out all the acorns, dash through someone, and have all 12 acorns come back to you and hit the enemy for some massive burst damage. And naturally, depending on the acorn you picked up, this either slowed or did bonus damage, which made it even stronger. Rats 3, Acorn Blast, was largely the same as it is now. It just shot 4 acorns instead of 3, but it also couldn't stun like it does now. It is worth to mention though, of course, that its damage was off the charts crazy with Sapphire Acorn, since it already did 280 plus 100% scaling, and then would explode for even more damage with the Sapphire Acorn, which got pretty nutty. Oh, and of course, Emerald Acorn plus this alone was enough to propel solo lane Rat into viability back then. I can't find exact numbers on the heal from the Emerald Acorn, but given it procced 4 times, once for each acorn he throws, and would proc off minions, it was pretty safe to say this was one of the best sustainabilities in the game when combined with the Emerald Acorn. And finally, Rat's ultimate was essentially the same as it is now. The only difference was that it did more damage and had a larger landing circle, but didn't have the knockup it does now. Still though, 570 plus 100% scaling with crazy mobilities to boot was a pretty damn powerful ult nonetheless. Alright, so let's take a look at what changes Rat had leading up to his rework. just look at this. 2 weeks after release, and these are the nerfs he received in a single patch. Look at all that red text. So yeah, June 16th, 2015 in patch 2.8, Rat's ultimate, Dart, and most of his acorns were hit in some way. The ult damage was tanked down to a much more reasonable 440 plus 70% from the 570 plus 100% it was before, and he also had to jump from each branch a little faster, meaning he couldn't stay up there quite as long. That was fixed, or nerfed depending on how you want to look at it, to mark every target it hits with the dash instead of just one. So if it hits 3 people with it, hitting any of those 3 people again with the ability would put it on cooldown instead of resetting it. This did help a little bit with the ludicrous 6 dashes shit, but to be honest it was still pretty OP. Opal Acorn had a scaling reduction on the lightning bolts, Emerald had a healing reduction, and Sapphire had a damage reduction. Also, both tier 2 Acorns had their power rightfully reduced from 30 to 25, and also the pen on the Emerald and Sapphire Acorns was reduced from 15 to 10. I don't even know how Hi-Rez thought 15 pen on an already ridiculous item was fair, but yeah, it was nerfed. A little while later in patch 2.11, the dash and the ult were hit again, with the time taken from Rat to jump from the ground up to the tree being increased, and also hard limiting Rat's dash to only 2 resets. After this, Rat was largely considered trash for a while. I think the aim of these nerfs was to just kneecap Ratatoskr so people stopped complaining about him, because after that it was actually a while before Rat would be touched again. But on May 24th, 2016, in the middle of Season 3, Hi-Rez had finally had enough of Rat being a shitstain and reworked him into what we have today. I won't spend too much time covering the rework since you can just play present day Rat and see what he's like now, but the Acorns were replaced with one single Acorn. He gained a lot of CC with the stun and the knockup, but lost a lot of his burst damage potential in the rework. But don't you worry, reworked Rat was still OP at launch. Maybe not as ridiculous as pre-rework Rat's release, but some nerfs were still in order. The next 2 patches straight after his release saw some pretty big cooldown increases and damage reductions to his 3 basic abilities, with another 2 patches following hitting his passive Acorn and another damage nerf on Acorn Blast. It was a while before any more official nerfs hit the table for Rat, but I thought this one was pretty funny. In patch 3.17, they fixed his ultimate doing 100 extra damage at rank 1. Like, that's a serious thing, Hi-Rez, how did that take this long? That's literally 50% extra damage just from a random error somewhere. Yeah, I just thought that was typical Hi-Rez, but Rat's next official nerfs came in early Season 4 with patch 4.3. The dark cooldown reduction was halved and the landing radius for his ult was also hit. Also, they changed the pricing structure of the Acorn tree around a bit, mostly to stop people buying a starter item and tier 2 Acorn to rush it early. And what I think is the first actual intended buff to Rat since its release in Season 2, Flurry was buffed and its protection shred and scaling fairly recently in patch 4.18. It's actually crazy how until this point it's been nothing but nerfs for the guy. Yeah, you could maybe count the rework as a buff, but it's a rework, not a straight up buff. But after that we're back to nerfing Rat, with Season 5 bringing a few more nerfs to the table for our fluffy friend. But anyway, that's Ratatoskr. From his release all the way up to present day as of the release of this video, he's actually one of the gods that has received the most amount of nerfs over time. While Release Guan received like enormous batches of nerfs all at once, Rat was continually nerfed into the ground, then reworked, then nerfed again for more than an entire season before he got a single buff. That's pretty crazy to think about. But yeah, as always, let me know who you want me to cover next on Release God Histories. Leave a like if you did enjoy and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Check out my community Discord server where we discuss everything Smite and my Patreon page linked below, and I'll catch you guys later. Peace out, you nerds.